morning. I believe the last time I was asked to speak in chapel, I think it was last semester, I'd forgotten about it and came running in here about 11:05, sat down next to Travis and was scrambling to try to figure out what to do. And then when it was time for the speaker to get up, Bill Bajents slowly and calmly walked up. And it was a miracle. Because we had double booked, and Bill, of course, did not forget that he was supposed to speak, and so he saved me. And Dr. Bajents has an amazing ability to save you from yourself if you'll let him. And so use him as a wonderful resource. Sometimes he saves people even when he doesn't know it. Sometimes he saves people when he does know it. So I was asked to speak today on ministry as a profession, and specifically about continuing education. And I got to thinking about the first part, ministry as a profession, and whenever I'm asked to address a topic like that, one of my first instincts is, and especially nice now that I'm actually down in the library on a daily basis, is to explore what kind of resources we have at OML. And I think that's a good idea for all of you. Spend time in the library exploring our resources. And I came across this book with the title, Brothers, We Are Not, with a big old N-O-T, We Are Not Professionals. Well, that got my attention because I was supposed to argue that we are professionals, and there is this fellow arguing that we're not. And that's one of the things I love about an academic library like ours is you're participating in a big conversation, aren't you? Across the world, across time, and you have the opportunity to interact with all sorts of voices. There will be some that you agree with immediately. There will be some you disagree with immediately. There will be some based on the evidence that's presented that you come to agree with, and you actually change your mind, that's learning. So I opened the book up and I read the first paragraph. And here's how it begins. We pastors, or if you will, ministers, are being killed by the professionalizing of the pastoral ministry. The mentality of the professional is not the mentality of the prophet. It is not the mentality of the slave of Christ. Professionalism has nothing to do with the essence and heart of the Christian ministry. The more professional we long to be, the more spiritual death we will leave in our wake. For there is no professional childlikeness, Matthew 18:3. There is no professional tenderheartedness, Ephesians 4:32. And there is no professional panting after God, Psalm 42:1. As I reflected on that paragraph, one of the things that jumps out to me in reading it is there's a high degree of certainty in the author's perspective. For instance, professionalism has nothing to do with the essence and heart of the Christian ministry. I think the author is asking us to make a false choice. In other words, we have to either choose Christian ministry or we have to choose professionalism, that you can't have both. I am on board with this writer's notion that preachers and ministers ought to fulfill, in some sense, a prophetic ministry. I'm on board with the idea of childlike humility or tenderheartedness or panting after God. But can those things happen in a professional manner? Can those things happen in a professional setting? I believe that they can. So that got me to thinking about a question. I got to thinking about how we think about work. A lot of times people will, when you first meet somebody, you might ask them or they might ask you, what do you do? Right? And they're probably not talking about what are your hobbies? What do you do on Saturday afternoon? They want to know Monday morning at 8 o'clock, what is your what? What is your job? Okay, that's almost how we sort of We identify ourselves and we identify other people by what they do in a job. So it got me to thinking about the term job, the term profession, and the term vocation or calling, if you will. So if you had to give a quick definition of the word job, how would you define it? Anybody? Okay, employment. Okay, so with that idea is that you're doing something for somebody else, right? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, you're performing a task for somebody else in exchange for compensation, some kind of monetary value, typically. So yeah, I think that's right. A job, we would define a job as I do this activity, I get paid for it, right? Okay. How would you distinguish a profession from a job? Anybody got any ideas? Profession.
Profession didn't necessarily mean that you were working for money. It meant that was what you chose to do. That was your life calling, so to speak.
Okay, and we're going to kind of move from profession into this notion of vocation in a minute, but you're onto something, aren't you? That it's not so much, as much about what you do at any particular moment in time. It's almost who you are, right? Does a profession require oftentimes more training than typically a job? A profession sort of implies that you get some kind of training, typically lengthy training, right? Some kind of academic degree or some kind of credentialing that says you can practice this profession. Okay, what kind of jobs, if you will, do we typically associate with the word practice? Doctors, lawyers, right? They are professionals, aren't they? They have gone to school for a long time. They have gotten certain credentials, and they practice a profession. Okay? All right, good. And they typically have to do some sort of continuing ed, don't they? Okay? So if your job is to put together a widget on the factory floor, that's a good and right and wholesome activity and job. It's not necessarily going to require, though, a lot of continuing ed once you know how that sort of thing works, right? You just do it every day. Whereas in a profession, they sort of expect you to learn and grow and develop. Now, let's add that third component, the idea of a vocation or a calling, and how would that expand our understanding of job, profession, that kind of thing? What would you add when you think about a calling? Okay. A mission. Okay. And what does mission imply? It comes from the heart. It is something bigger than ourselves. We might be participating in something that outlasts our lifetime, right? It sort of has a moral, spiritual sort of component to it, doesn't it?
It also has a goal at the end.
Okay.
You may never reach it, you're striving toward it.
Yes, I agree with that. A goal, although maybe not achievable in your lifetime, you're moving towards something. Jim?
It's something that comes from the heart that you would do, even if you didn't get paid for it. I mean, obviously, you need it.
Okay.
This is what you love. This is what you want to do on Monday morning every day.
It's your passion, right? You want to do this thing. And if we didn't need money, money comes in handy, doesn't it? But if you didn't need it, what would you be doing on Monday morning? And if you're doing that thing, that could be indicative that this is your vocation or your calling. Now, I want you to think about ministry. Ministry involves all three of those things, doesn't it? If you say, I preach for XYZ congregation, what are you describing? That's your job, right? Okay. You are supposed to be in the pulpit on Sunday mornings and you get compensated for it. That's a job. But ministry is a profession too, isn't it? You are in school here, many of you in this institution, either getting an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree. That implies that there's some training involved to be part of ministry as a profession. There's some credentialing involved, especially today, right? You might be able to get a job preaching for a very small congregation without credentialing, right? But if you want to work in a large congregational setting and with multiple programs, they're probably going to expect some kind of education, some kind of training, some kind of credentialing. And one of the things you do here, in addition to just learning, is you're getting that sort of training, that sort of credentialing. And ministry definitely involves this sense of vocation or calling, right? In fact, most people associate, I would say that maybe the two top professions that people associate with this idea of a calling are ministry and teaching, probably. I see that those two linked to that notion quite often. And there might be some that say, I have received a direct calling from God telling me to go preach. Typically, in our setting, we're probably going to think about it in less personal terms, but the idea is I feel a moral obligation to participate in this thing called Christian ministry. And so ministry is all three of those things. We don't need to have this false choice between it being a job, between it being a profession, and between it being a calling. So, back to the original topic. Ministry as a profession, continuing education. So, you're obviously going to school, right? If you're enrolled here, and many of you here are, and there are going to be people that are in the Mdiv program that might watch this lesson later, and you're already enrolled. But I would say that's one of the most important things you can do. If I were to list things, and I'm probably going to do that, what things can you do to sort of enhance yourself as you continue to educate yourself, as you receive some kind of professional development? What can you do? The first thing I think about is getting another degree or enrolling in a class, okay? So when you get the undergraduate degree or you get your master's degree, I would encourage you not to necessarily think that that's the end of my formal education, okay? Because when you're in a classroom and you're enrolled in a class or a degree program, what benefits are there for that sort of way of thinking about continuing ed? Structure, okay? That is a really big one for me, because structure can be motivating, right? Because I know I have to be in a particular place at a particular time. That sort of pushes me in a particular direction. What else?
It makes a statement about you. If you're participating in a continuing education, whether you're seeking a degree or just taking classes to help, what it's saying about you is that you don't feel that you have arrived, that you're still willing to learn and to be able to adapt to that learning.
That's a really good point, because in ministry, you're going to be doing a lot of teaching. You're going to be doing a lot of, you're going to be transferring knowledge to other people, aren't you? And there is the danger that we might begin to think, well, I'm the one who knows everything because I'm the trained person. And enrolling in a class indicates a little bit of humility, doesn't it? I don't know everything. There are still things I need to learn. There are people that know more about a particular topic or subject than me. And that might be a good thing to indicate to others in the congregation. What else?
Kirk always told us when I was doing my youth ministry undergrad, he said, take good notes because
Absolutely. And think about it. You're sitting there listening, okay, and interacting with people that have a high degree of knowledge, right? Okay? And if you can take that and use that as a resource going forward in your ministry, it is a really big benefit. So if you can get into a classroom and you're going to be interacting with somebody who has spent his or her whole life thinking about a particular topic, that's a really amazing opportunity that you can use as a wonderful resource. So I would encourage you, as you think about continuing it, think about staying in school in some form or fashion, as long as you can. It's a motivator. It provides structure. It gives you access to resources that aren't available to everybody. Okay? As I think about opportunities to continue your education, I also think about attending some sort of seminar or conference. A lot of churches are pretty smart where they actually encourage their ministers to take a week or two and attend a conference or a seminar. And the wonderful thing is we've got great conferences and seminars available all the time, all over the world, don't we? But we've got wonderful conferences and seminars that take place on this campus all the time. And so use those as a resource. Plus, with technology, a lot of times these conferences and seminars are available online. So you wouldn't even have to necessarily pick up and drop everything and travel to a different location for a week. You can access that material where you are. Conferences and seminars are really good ways to continue your education, because these are people of like mind. These are people that are involved in things that you're interested in. They're participating in the same profession, and so that sort of camaraderie can be very helpful. So go to these conferences and go to these seminars.
There's another value. Certain ones, I know in years past, I attended a lot of the biblical archaeology conventions, and you're meeting the specialists there.
Yes.
They're top of their field in certain areas. And there's all kinds of seminars or conventions like that. I know that some of our guys attend the biblical ones that are along the same lines, and you're meeting the guys who are leading in those fields too. So you're learning from the experts.
That's a really good point, and I'm going to let that segue into another suggestion. But Matt, you have a comment, question? That really makes a lot of sense. Typically, the moment you get in a classroom, you realize how little you know about a particular topic or a particular subject or field, rather than how much you know. We've probably all been in classes with people who came in, sat down in the front, first day of class, thought they knew it all. By midterm, they're gone because they lacked a little bit of that humility, and they couldn't handle the idea of, I need to actually sit down and learn and maybe shut up for a little while and maybe pay attention. That leads me to number 3. I would think about joining some kind of scholarly society, maybe like the Society of Biblical Literature or something like that. Because as Wayne pointed out, there are a lot of people that are, this is all they think about. They're experts in this particular area, they're experts in their field, and they're constantly researching and writing. And by being members of these groups, you can take advantage of cutting-edge research. You can sort of see what other people are talking about in this field, and it can be very helpful. So I would say consider joining some of these societies in areas that might interest you. They're often publishing things, and you may get discounts on books and things like that through this process as well. So I would do that. The fourth thing I thought about is I thought about the role of independent research. Now, most of us, when you're in full-time ministry, all we can do is stay ahead, and trying to get to the next Sunday, right? Okay, because if you're doing 2 sermons on Sunday and a Bible class on Sunday, and in a lot of places even a Bible class on Wednesday, 2 sermons and 2 Bible classes every week throughout the year, year upon year upon year, is quite a demand. Okay, but at the same time, think about it. You're doing independent research every week, whether you think about it that way or not, aren't you? For your sermons and for your Bible classes. Turn that into a project. If you're teaching a class on Hebrews some quarter, turn that into some kind of big independent research project. And guess what? As alumni from here, we would be glad to talk to you at HCU Press and Cypress Publications about how some of that independent research might become a book. And so think about doing independent research and turning your work into projects that can be developed, that can bless other people beyond your congregation. If you do a great series on baptism or do a great series on a particular book and everybody's talking about how helpful it was, guess what other people are going to think? They're going to think it's helpful too. And so think about ways that you can get that in the hands of others. And then the fourth thing that I think about, I don't know how much time I have, but this is fifth thing, this will be the end, is just do ministry. Sometimes people will ask, how do you become a good writer? What's the answer to that question? Write. Now, there's a second component to that is read. Okay? Read good writing and practice it. Write. Okay? A lot of times people aren't very good writers, not because they don't have the ability, it's because they just don't do it. Okay? So, if you want to get better at writing, write. If you want to be a better teacher, teach. If you want to be a better preacher, preach. So think about your everyday ministry as continuing education. If you want to get better, some people say, I'm not good at visitation. Well, how do you get better and more comfortable and more adept at visitation? Talking about how you're not good at it? No, visiting. Go along with somebody that, quote, is good at it. See what they do. See what they don't do. And then practice it. And that brings us full circle back to this idea of a profession. Because what did we say? What word did we use to describe doctors and lawyers? They practice. You practice medicine. You practice law. Okay? You practice ministry. How do you do that? By doing ministry. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. The more you'll learn, the more you'll grow, and the more you'll be able to bless other people.
There's another thing with that, Brad. Use it or lose it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, anybody that studied languages knows if you don't practice it, it's very easy to lose that capability very quickly. Same thing is true about anything. So use it. Absolutely.